Hey guys, how you doing? So welcome to the second lesson in our genetics unit. This lesson we're going to focus on reproduction. Now, what I've done with this lesson is I've actually split it into two videos. Okay, the first one we're actually going to look at reproduction and how that works in the body, and then and then in the second lesson we're actually going to focus in on the issue of abortion and having a look at some of the pros and cons of abortion. Okay, so what I've done is I've removed the abortion slides from part of this slide, and I'm going to put it into a separate video. Okay, so let's have a look at reproduction. Alright, so last lesson we looked at how your cells contain 46 chromosomes, and we call that a somatic cell, but we also then looked at gametes. Okay, so we're going to focus in on that in this lesson. Gametes being the sex cells of your body. So gametes always contain half the number of chromosomes as a regular cell, right? So in animals, the sperm and the egg will contain half the number of chromosomes that a normal cell would have. In plants, the pollen and the ovule would contain half the number of chromosomes that a regular cell in the plant would have, right? For people, that is 23 single chromosomes, yeah? We call that a haploid number. So remember, 46 chromosomes in a person is the diploid, or the full number, whereas 23 single will be a haploid number, represented by the single letter N. Yeah, so in people, N would equal to 23, right? In plants, N might be something else. When the two gametes join together, they form the diploid cell, and they form the zygote, and that's the first new cell of an organism is called the zygote. Yeah, here is a GIF of the sperm cell and what that looks like in actual real time, and then this is what the egg looks like in real time. Okay, so the sperm N equals to 23, right? Joins together with the egg, N equals to 23, will form a new zygote where 2N will give you 46. So 46 being the number of chromosomes in a new cell in the individual. Okay, so in a karyotype, you know, you would say that let's say this is a new individual. These chromosomes here in blue probably belong to the sperm, and these ones in red will belong to the egg. Okay, just for kicks, see if you can determine whether this individual is a male or a female. Okay, all right, so where's my image? There we go. Now, females, the eggs will always carry 22 autosomes and 1 X chromosome. Yeah, the reason for that is because it doesn't matter what you know, which half you kind of break up. If you think of it from that perspective, the females have 2 X chromosomes, so 1 X chromosome will always go into an egg, right? The males, on the other hand, they will produce 22 autosomes, and they will either have 1 X chromosome or 1 Y chromosome. Okay, so if it's a female offspring, right, then the X chromosome is what meets with the X chromosome in the female egg to produce 2 X chromosomes. If it's a male offspring, it'll be a Y chromosome joining together with the X chromosome from the egg to form a male offspring, right? Thus, the presence of a Y chromosome is what determines the sex of a baby. Okay, let's take a look at reproductive organs. Yeah, how do the organs actually produce the gametes that we use, right? So let's look at male. So here is a diagram of the male reproductive organ. Yeah, just to give you identifiers here. Production of sperm occurs in the testicles, and they sit inside the scrotum, which is the sac, right? And then the testicles sit just outside the body, where it is at a comfortable 35 degrees or 35.1 degrees. Now, production of sperm happens outside, just a little bit outside the body, because that is the optimum temperature for sperm production. Yeah, your body, your core temperature is about 36.7 degrees. The production of sperm needs to happen just slightly outside of that, that temperature. Yeah, your testicles will produce about 120 million sperm cells every day. Yeah, and that takes about 64 days to produce, and it all happens in the testes. And then what happens is the sperm is then delivered through this tube called the vas deferens, which then attaches and joins together with the urethra, where it is ejaculated through the penis, right? And the prostate is the muscle that's kind of responsible for that push or that ejaculation, right? That's attached to your bladder. So you can see that in males, both urine and sperm goes through the same opening, right? This is the structure of a sperm cell right here. Yeah, you've got the head, which contains the nucleus and the haploid number of chromosomes, and then you've got the main organelle sitting in the connecting midsection, and then the sperm has a flagella, which allows it to swim, right, through, as it allows it to swim through the semen, right? Let's look at females. So in female reproductive systems, it's a slight difference, in case you haven't picked up, right? The bladder sits at the front there, and the urethra sits and has its own opening there. But the female contains a second opening where the ovaries there are joined together to the fallopian tube, attaches to the uterine wall, and then the cervix is the opening of the uterus to the vagina, and then the vagina opens up to the outside wall. So you can see there females have two different openings, one for urine and one for the uterus. Yeah. So here is a front-on view. Production of egg or the ovum occurs in the ovaries, right about there. Okay. Now, females are a little bit different from males in the sense that production of eggs actually occurs at birth. So a female is actually born having already produced all of her eggs, whereas males produce sperm continuously. Yeah. She produces about 1 million at birth, but only 500 of those eggs will actually be released and are viable to have children, right, and conceive. If you do the maths, 500 from the time of puberty and stopping at the age of 52, roughly at menopause, is about 1 per month. Okay, and that coincides with the menstrual cycle of a female. In fact, the menstrual cycle surrounds this process of releasing the egg. Okay. So the egg then travels through the fallopian tube, this tube here. Now, if it encounters the sperm and becomes fertilized, it happens around about here, and it will travel down as a zygote, where it implants into the uterine wall and then becomes a baby. If it is unfertilized, then it goes down to the uterine wall, still attaches, but then it becomes shed along with the uterine wall in a process called menstruation, and that's when the girls have the periods, right? This is what the cross-section of the ovary would look like under a microscope, and that's the egg there. When the egg gets released, it gets secreted through that little, through the sac, and then this is what remains of it, right? Now, how does fertilization work? So, day 0 is when conception happens, where the combination of the egg and the sperm happens, and the egg becomes fertilized by the sperm. Yeah. Before that, we have ovulation. Ovulation is the release of the egg from the ovaries to go into the fallopian tube, and that's the the egg there being released in ovulation. It meets with the sperm at day 0, somewhere around there, and then from then on, we are looking at the fertilization gestation kind of process. Yeah, the cell divides within the first 4 days, and it's basically just going through regular cell division. When it gets to about day 4, you're looking at about an 8-cell large mass called a morula, and then the morula continues to divide, and then it gets to day 5 to 9, where it is now called a blastocyst. So you can see there's 2 different parts of the cell here, or 2 different parts of the baby, if you will, right? This little mass here, that becomes the embryo and develops into the baby, whereas the outer cell mass there, that actually turns into the placenta. And so the placenta actually belongs to the baby, right? And it attaches to the uterine wall, where it will then receive nutrients from the mother and transfer it to the baby. But the placenta belongs to the baby. So let's have a look at gestation. So what happens in after it is fertilized, and now we're looking at the development of the embryo/fetus. Yeah. So the development during the pregnancy is called gestation, and it is divided into 2 stages. The first one is the embryonic stage, and the second one is the fetal stage. Yeah. Let's start at the embryonic development stage. So the first 12 weeks is the embryonic phase. Yeah, that is commonly referred to as first term in pregnancy, and this is where all the major organs are being produced. Yeah, the central nervous system by week 3, the heart week 5, little arms and legs week 5, eyes week 5, sexual organs by week 12. Okay, if you were to map it out, this is kind of what it would look like. Yeah, so we are talking about going from the size of a little pinhead all the way to probably by the end of the embryonic stage, by about week 12, we're probably looking at around about here somewhere, yeah? And you can see the difference between here and here is quite phenomenal. Yeah, all the major organs are being established. You can see at the start of the phase, you can still see some vestigial organs that people used to have, like a little tail. Some parts you can see the digits are not fully formed yet, but by the end of the embryonic stage, most likely most of the organs are fully developed, and it's just a matter of then growing larger onwards. Okay, so the fetal development goes from the 12 weeks all the way to the 40th weeks. And this is where the baby grows larger and just basically gets to the size that it is by the end of that stage, yeah? And this is usually where a lot of the discomfort starts to happen, because now the baby's actually getting pretty big, right? And so, it starts off kind of around about there. By week 12, it's about the size of about there, and then when it gets to 40, it's pretty phenomenal, taking up a very large portion of the female's body, right? If you were to compare it to kind of like a fruit, if you will, then at 4 weeks is probably the size of a little poppy seed, but by the time it gets to 40 weeks, you can see it's pretty much the size of a watermelon, and then the female has to give birth to it. So it's pretty phenomenal, yeah. All right. Let's take a look at twins formation. So what happens when you get a split in the zygote really, really early on? So for whatever reason, right, after the sperm and the egg combine together, and the cell divides, if the cell division splits apart and the two cells separate at a certain point in time, then you are now looking at two masses of identical cells that are separated from each other, which means you get the formation of twins, right? So there are two types of twins, identical twins and fraternal twins. Identical twins are commonly called, not commonly, I guess, scientifically referred to as monozygotic. Mono meaning single, zygote, it refers to the zygote, yeah? And so they are identical because they used to be one cell and they split into two. Fraternal twins is if you have two sperm combining with two eggs in the same fallopian tube area or whatever, yeah? So sometimes the female might release two eggs instead of one, and then two sperm make it to the egg, and you will get fraternal twins, yeah? The difference here is that identical twins share the same DNA because they used to be the same cell, whereas fraternal twins don't, because they have a different egg and a different sperm, and the different combination of those genetics then combine together to give you your fraternal twins, right? Usually, identical twins will share the same placenta, whereas fraternal twins will share two separate placenta, because you've now got two placentas being formed from two different individuals, okay? And that's what it kind of looks like there. If the split happens much later in your twins, what happens is you can get conjoined twins, right? So the cleavage process that occurs in the morula, causing it to divide, might split up into two cell masses, right? And if it happens in 1 to 3 days, then what you kind of get is two bodies with two different placentas, yeah? So this is pretty early on, right? It's called a dichorionic and a diamniotic twin, right? Which means you have two babies, two placentas, two amniotic sacs, right? If you go a little bit later on, in other words, the cell is a blastocyst already, and it starts to split at day 4 to 8, what you're getting is two bodies sharing the same placental mass, yeah? So what that means is that the same placenta is giving nutrients to two different bodies. If you go even later than that, then the two babies will share the same amniotic sac, and the amniotic sac is the sac that surrounds the baby and contains the fluid sitting inside the uterus. And so, in pregnancy terms, when the water breaks, that's when the amniotic sac is broken, and then the baby is about to be delivered, right? In this particular case here, if you have a monochorionic and a monoamniotic, then the two babies are sharing the same. If the split happens to much later than that, day 13 to 15, what you're getting is that the baby has is now splitting apart, but hasn't fully split apart, therefore forming your conjoined twins. So you get one body and one placenta as a result of that. Yeah. Now, conjoined twins are called can also be called Siamese twins, because they are referring to the original kind of conjoined twins that were popularized, that originated from Siam, and therefore Siamese twins. Yeah. Now, here is a case study of Lucie Vandenberg in the Herald Sun in 2013. Yeah. So, oh, sorry, it was probably written by Lucie Vandenberg. So Mrs. Saltmarsh unexpectedly went into labor on February the 28th with her husband Colin, having to deliver their first daughter Yasmin at home, right? The couple knew from scans that they'd been blessed with triplets. So within minutes, 4 ambulances pulled up outside, each one for each triplet and one for the mum, right? However, in a bizarre twist, the other 2 babies actually didn't come out. So, the first baby was born, but then the other 2 kind of stayed in place. For 8 days, she waited in hospital until about 24 hours into the second labor. She then gave birth to Yasmin's brother, and then the sister Zareen. So you can see what's really interesting is you've got triplets, but one is being born, kind of 8 days apart from the other 2. So some pretty amazing there. Oops. All right. So we're going to leave it at that. And next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look specifically at the issue of abortion, and we're going to discuss it together. Okay. So I'll see you guys then.